The Pacific Group is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and all members of the community are welcome to attend. The single most important aspect of AA recovery, however, is the principle of one alcoholic relating to another alcoholic. Therefore, only alcoholics actually participate in our meetings. If your primary problem is other than alcoholism, we think it would also be helpful to you to contact an anonymous organization which more specifically deals with your addiction. In any case, we hope that what you learn here may be helpful to your recovery and or understanding. Good evening. My name is Anthony Harris, and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to the Pacific Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. The format of this meeting is 2 10-minute speakers, a coffee break, and a main speaker. Our first 10-minute speaker tonight is Patrick M.
Hi everyone, my name is Patrick and I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank Duffy for inviting me up here this evening. And I didn't expect to be first. I thought it was women first, or ladies first, but I'm here. My sobriety date is March 30th, 1981. And I have a home group, and this is it. I was born in Pacoima. I was born in Belfast, Northern Ireland. You don't have to be Irish Catholic to be alcoholic, but it helps. I don't know if I was born an alcoholic. I don't know if I inherited alcoholism. But I do believe when I picked up my first drink, an alcoholic was born in me, because I drank alcoholically ever since. I didn't pick up a drink and then just go drinking 24/7. I had my first drink when I was about 11 years old, and I blacked out. Right from the very first drink, alcohol got me in trouble because I blacked out, woke up the next morning with my parents screaming at me and asking me which drugs I'd done. Apparently it's okay to do drugs in Ireland, but it's not okay to... it's not okay to do drugs, but it's okay to do whatever I did on booze. So I probably drank about 2 more times after that, and both times I got myself in trouble, and both times I blacked out. But when I was about 15 years old, back in Ireland in those days, you left school at 15, and you got yourself a job. So now I was working, bringing in a paycheck. It was okay to go in the pubs. So I had to go in the pubs every Friday night with the guys, and I would drink my paycheck. The problem was I had to give my mother rent money every week, but I'd go back Monday morning and get it back off her again because I drank all mine over the weekend. When I was about 18 years old, the war broke out in Ireland, and I got involved in the war. I did a lot of stuff there that I shouldn't have done, and it got to the point where my mother didn't ask me to leave home. She told me to leave the goddamn country altogether. So I left Ireland, went across to England. Everything was going to be different. I joined the scaffold crew. I've been scaffolding for 55 years now. I'm getting the hang of it. And the only problem was I had to travel all over Europe every 3 months with this scaffold crew. And a lot of the countries we worked in, there'd always been a crew there before us and been 86th. So we had to stay in construction camps. The problem with that was there's nothing else to do, only work, play cards and drink. And that's what I did for the next 12 years. Eventually, back in those days, they didn't have cell phones or pagers or anything. We used to get telegrams with a ticket to tell us the next job to go to. So everybody on the crew was getting telegrams, and I wasn't getting one. And I eventually got one that says, here's a ticket back home. you're a danger to the crew and to other workers, because we were working 400 or 500 feet up in the air, and they used to show us these safety movies in the camps, and the movie said if you dropped a little nut that size from 100 feet, it could go straight through a hard hat and kill you. Well, I was working 400 and 500 feet up in the air, and I was dropping wrenches and tubes this length. I was putting people's lives in danger. So I finally got my ticket back to England, and by this time I had been married and divorced and everything a couple of times. And I went back with the ex-wife of mine and asked her to put me up, and she said, okay. I told her it was going to be different. I was going to go look for a job, and everything was going to be different. But where do you go look for a job? You go in the pub. So I'd go in the pub every day, look for a job. Come about 5 o'clock, I'd go home and have a nap, waking up the next day and do the same thing all over again, and I never got a job. Where's the timekeeper? There she is. There's no button, no lights up here tonight. I turned the lights off. So I never got a job, and she threw me out, and I continued drinking. Eventually, I worked my way down into Skid Row, and I lived on Skid Row for about 9 months or 12 months. I don't know exactly how long. I was sitting panhandling one day on Skid Row, and a guy sat down next to me, and I'd worked with him years previous, and he recognized me and told me he was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and would I like to go to a meeting. And I said, no thanks. First of all, I didn't know what the hell Alcoholics Anonymous was. My problem wasn't booze. My problem was slow horses, fast women, and bad luck. Nothing to do with booze. So anyway, he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pay for a hotel bill for you for a week. I know where I can get you a job, and I'll take you to my friend's house and get you cleaned up. I said, okay. So he got me into a hotel. It was above the pub, upstairs above the pub. And he got me into a hotel, took me to his friend's house, got me showered, gave me some of his friend's old clothes. And the next day, he took me to a job. But that evening, he took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, AA in England 40 years ago, excuse me for God, was like AA used to be here 75 years ago. There was no high-bottom drunks. There was no drug addicts. There was no pretty girls. I don't know why the hell I stayed, but there was just a bunch of Skid Row bums, and there was no big meetings like this. The meeting I went to, there was probably about 8 or 9 people in there, and about 6 teeth between the whole meeting, and I knew most of the people off the streets. So I didn't want to share, but I didn't think I was an alcoholic because I didn't know what the hell an alcoholic was. So everybody got to share in the room, and I couldn't hear anybody. The only thing I could think of, I'm going to sleep in the bed above the pub tonight. And that's all I could think about. So everybody shared until they got to this old lady called Winnie. When I knew Winnie, she was the bag lady on Skid Row. And she had no teeth. But here she was sharing at the meeting, and she had a full set of teeth in. She had beautiful grey hair, blue-grey hair. She was wearing a dress. In those days, people used to go dress up just to go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And she was all dressed up, and she was sitting holding hands with a guy called John. When I knew John, he was a wino and a bum on Skid Row, but here he was, and he had a set of false teeth in too. I think he got his from a donkey or something. They didn't fit. They used to get their teeth from the morgue in those days, and their glasses, because they got them for free. I think John went to a vet and got his from a vet. But anyway, they were sitting holding hands and they were talking about how happy they were and they lived together and they were talking about God. And I thought to myself, wow, if they can get sober, maybe I can do it. Maybe I can get myself a little room somewhere with a little gas ring to do my cooking on, and everything will be okay. And that was almost 40 years ago. And I got to tell you, I got more... Excuse me. I've had a pretty bad year. I got a lot more here than I expected when I first got to Alcoholics Anonymous. But this year hasn't been a very good year for Tammy and I. We've had Tammy's mother passed. I've had a couple of heart attacks. I got throat cancer. They cut out my left larynx. And Tammy's been there through all of this and working like a dog. And we have a little grandbaby, Alex's son, that we take care of. And Alex is a great dad, but he can't do it alone. And we just have a busy life today. And it's all thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous. When I got here, I just wanted a little gas ring. Time's up. Thank you very much.
Our second 10-minute speaker is Montoya R.
I'm Montoya, I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Duffy, for asking me to share, and thank you, Patrick, for your 10 minutes. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm very excited. I guess I would be here even if I was not excited. I think that's just, conservative AA training. So I'll get started. I grew up in Harlem. It's a small town in northern Manhattan. That joke never lands. I don't have the type of story where, I grew up and innately I knew something was wrong. I had a blast. I was raised by my mother and my grandmother. We were super poor. I went to a pretty competitive, maybe like school in an affluent neighborhood, and, I didn't notice that there was any incongruence. My mom used to get food stamps on the first of the month, and I would rip them all out, and I would throw them up, and I felt like I was rich. I was a happy kid, a really, really happy kid. And when I look back on the way that things have played out, I definitely can see the presence of God in my life. My mom got sober the day I was born, and so I grew up in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I saw the conviviality, and I saw the fellowship, and I saw the change in people's lives. And maybe a little later in my life, around 9 or 10, she relapsed. And so I saw when AA works, and then I also saw when AA doesn't work. And I'm so grateful for that because, I got to see that it's not about circumstances or bad luck, or it's about a mental obsession and a physical craving. So about my drinking, I maybe started drinking around 15 or 16. I wasn't really interested in alcohol. I was pretty stressed out at the time. My house was a little bit crazy. The first drink I had didn't work, and I was like, of course it didn't, right? And I went home and it was fine. But when I had that drink that finally did, it wasn't necessarily that, I remember thinking everything I ever thought about my life and my feelings and my perspective, it doesn't matter anymore. If we're starting from here onwards, right? I'm the type of drinker that doesn't like the circumstances of my life, so I drink to change them, and I wake up in the morning and I'm sober. That's not good enough, so I have to change my life in order to match who I feel like when I'm drinking. And there were probably 4 or 5 stages of what I looked like when I was drinking. They were all very chameleonic. There was, me going to a very small liberal arts college, and I had the drug rug and the long braids, and I was a hippie and Birkenstocks, but they hurt, but I wasn't going to tell you because I just wanted to fit in. Around that time in my life also was probably the worst part of my drinking. I went to a liberal arts school. I went to film school, and I could tell very quickly, one of these things is not like the other. I lied to get in. I didn't have a transcript. I wasn't prepared to sort of be a part of a social organization. And so when I got there and everyone else was excelling and had ideas and was completing assignments, I just kind of started receding to the background. And at the time, my grandmother got pretty sick. Her dementia got really bad. And so the story on the surface is, poor me, I can't graduate. I have to drop out and take care of this elderly woman who means so much to me. And really what's going on is that, like, I can't keep up here, and I'm afraid, and I don't want you to know, so I'm just going to go now. And so I dropped out, and, you know, that was in the face of a lot of people at that school that had done a lot to make sure that I could be there and maybe have a shot. And that's who I am when I'm drinking. That's also who I am when I'm sober. I'm just like a taker, right? Like, I just will consume everything and get scared and then run away. And so I moved in with my grandmother, and it was terrible. You know, I got to make an amends to her before she died, but what it came down to was that, you know, I am not a medical professional, and so I was not, you know, qualified to be giving care to someone that was really sick. What was really going on is that she had a spare bedroom, and I could drink and come and go whenever I wanted, and I could also tell you this really wild sob story about why it was okay that I live this way. You know, that was maybe a couple of other phases of what my life looked like when I was drinking. There was, you know, Montoya, who was like a downtown model, and I would go out with these promoters and like stay out all night. And I go to bed at 9, you know, I'm pretty far outside of my character at this point. And I'm drinking, and I'm like getting thrown out of clubs onto concrete, and I like have no money, and I'm like creeping home at like 6 a.m., like, and climbing into a trash bag, right? Because at my grandmother's house, like, there are roaches and there are bed bugs and there's clutter, and like I'm living between these two worlds that are like, again, incongruent, right? But you know, I'll do anything and fit into any situation. It means that I can keep drinking. Around that time, I also got like into wine sales and distribution. I don't know if anyone else relates to this, but like, if there's a way that I can fit into a world or a place where I can make myself not noticeable and there's money or drinks to be had, like, I will go all the way down that road. And so I actually became like pretty knowledgeable in that area, and like was up for a promotion to work for a wine distributor, and I just disappeared. I live down the block from this place, right, from this wine store, just like disappeared, never came back one day. And see my boss in the neighborhood, and it's like super awkward, because like, weren't you here last week? And another characteristic of my drinking is that I think that I'm invisible. I think that my behavior when I'm drinking and I'm sober, like, for some reason, if I'm drunk enough, if I can convince myself it's not happening, I don't see you doing that also. And these are the kind of things that I got to see play out when I was drinking, right? Because my behavior isn't really that much different when I'm sober. I kind of like pulled my stuff together and got a geographic and moved to Oregon, and got a job in advertising. And again, one of these things was not like the other. You know, I was living in corporate housing with all these really smart go-getter types of like kids. We were all interns living in a house, and I just could not do the thing anymore. Usually, maybe up until that point, I could fake it, right? Like, I could slap on a wig, or like figuratively or literally, and kind of like pull it together. But there was nothing left, and I could tell that people were starting to give me that look that was like, we know about you. And so I got into a lot of trouble, you know, and much worse than trouble, right? I alienated myself, just to the point that I'm not going to be fired, but I'm going to be that person that everyone knows, like, you don't want to be around. And so I have to actually stay there and ride out all of the situations that I've gotten myself into. I'm not a blackout drinker, right? I will wake up and I will remember, and I will need a drink in the morning. I also am like really frugal, so like, if I'm going to be drunk, I want to be drunk. Like, if I want to take a nap, that's how I'm going to like pass through time, right? But otherwise, like, I want to enjoy the sensation of being drunk, because it feels like all of my deepest hopes and wishes about who I think I am, right? I want to experience that. And so, you know, I'm in Oregon, and I'm lonely, and I'm miserable, and I'm in a very small apartment. And I used to drink with this guy, Dan. Dan had schizophrenia, and we would drink at this bar called Pizza Schmitza. Pizza Schmitza was awesome. They had this alligator sausage pizza that was so delicious. And beer in Oregon, like, they're really into, like, I don't know, like very alcoholic beers. And so I would drink with Dan. And one night, you know, I was like, people are getting on me about my drinking. People are saying I need to get sober. My mom was like really on it. I was like, what do you think? And he smacked me on the back. And I will remember this forever. My face went in my beer, and I remember thinking, yo, like, that sucks. Like, who does that? And he said, you know, Montoya, every day that you don't drink, like when you're sober, every day you get further from your last drink, you'll get closer to your next one. And I was like, I don't know. That doesn't really sound right. Also, like, you're crazy and you're drunk. So I didn't really believe him at the time. But the most powerful thing about that, and the thing that I'll remember forever, was that, like, he was telling the truth, right? God is always in the room. Always, right? And just a little part of me, like, maybe rebuked it, but was curious. And like, what I've learned here is that, like, you know, the truth can come from anywhere, right? Like, if I'm willing to listen and I'm maybe willing to take an action based on it, like, I can see dramatic results. And so I was like, whatever, I'll just go to a meeting. I went to a meeting in the morning, and that was the beginning of my journey in AA. You know, I got a sponsor. She was really nice. She had survived cancer and Parkinson's. And I lived 5 blocks away from my home group at the time, and she would drive in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and she'd pick me up, and I remember her hands would shake on the steering wheel, and I would be late, right? She would come 20 minutes to pick me up, to drive me a distance I could have walked, and I just still couldn't really show up, right? And part of that is, like, I resent the fact that you are wealthy and well-off and sober, and I really don't trust that you're being genuinely kind to me, so I'm just going to, like, test you a little bit, right? And she would call me at night, and she would say, if I survive cancer and Parkinson's, like, you can stay sober too, like, you can do anything. And I would be rolling a blunt, and I would go, sure, I'll see you in the morning. And I would drink every other day, and I'd come to the meeting, and I'd put my hand up, and I'd go, oh, this is so terrible, you know. And I'm glad that in the beginning, maybe the first year, people were really, really patient with me. The week that I turned a year sober, everyone in my home group was like, man, we lost a lot of money betting that you were going to relapse. And I was so offended by that, but they thought it was a wrap. You know, I learned a lot from that first sponsor. What I realized is that I'm not invisible. She saw the entire thing, right? Saw right through me, but was kind anyway. And, like, who does that, right? Really rolled out the carpet of the red carpet of Alcoholics Anonymous for me because I was sick, right? Like, I'm operating at a deficit. I don't even know how to show up on time, and you're giving me like 150%. And I learned that that's the way that I want to show new women what Alcoholics Anonymous looks like, and like what kindness really looks like. What Patrick said about his grandson, like, I didn't know that kindness really existed like that before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and it has been a real process of deflating my ego and taking really uncomfortable actions just to even be eligible to extend that type of kindness to people, right? And, like, real talk, if you're new, like all the little stuff, right, the contrary action, if you don't like it, like, you know, I'll just say that I didn't like it, right? And a lot of times I couldn't really see the forest for the trees, but all of those little behaviors, spiritually, they change something in me. It's like a Titanic is like shifting very, very slowly. And all of that stuff really, really counts. So if you're new, take your sponsor's direction. Thanks.
Our main speaker tonight is Susan Y.
Hi, I'm Susan Yotis, alcoholic. And thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Montoya. My sobriety date is June 28th, 1989. So coming up on my birthday, I have so much gratitude for you. I have so much gratitude for you. And I'm so touched to be in this room. I'm so grateful. Thank you, Duffy, for asking me. And I have a new favorite word, which is Montoya used, which was, it'll come back. Anyway. And thank you to all the people that I love so dearly here and that show me so much love, and my new bestie, Brian. Those wonderful traditions. I'll tell you how I got here. I was born in Dallas to a dying alcoholic father. He'd already died and been resuscitated and been all over the place. And a desperate mother I had 3 older sisters. And my mother is brilliant and beautiful and capable and clever and kind and compassionate and all these things, but she could not create a home he didn't have to drink in. And so she just grabbed up my sisters and me when I was a tiny baby and left him. So the first 5 years of my life were just living with my mom and my sisters. It was pretty mellow. My mom had to work all the time, and I took a cute little school bus to preschool and came home and drank Welch's grape juice and watched Zorro. That's what I remember those days. And when I was 5, my parents reconciled. So you hear about divorce trauma, but there's reconciliation trauma. And I just remember we took the train out here from Dallas, and some guy got on and twirled my mom in a circle, and I didn't like that, and I didn't like him, and I didn't like any of this. But we got here, and we all moved in together, and my parents were both immediately my dad had gotten sober when I was a baby, so he was 5 years sober, now Alcoholics Anonymous, very active. My mother got into Al-Anon. They're very active. My dad started dragging us around to meetings immediately. And now as a parent, I mean, I don't know that I drag around 4 little girls with cat glasses who just complained all the time, but he was very gracious and he did that. And he introduced us to you. And growing up, it all seemed, and plus you were always at our house. So, always at our house. There was a tiny little group of guys that would come over, play cards, play like tackle croquet, and every family meal, every holiday meal, sometimes one of you would live in our garage briefly. So to me, to me and my sisters, we called you the crazy AAs, and that's what you were. And so our parents' mantra was act right. So I learned to say, hello, how do you take your coffee? Go get it for you, and then hurry back to my room, like, ugh. So that went on. But one perk of this, chameleonic. That's the word. I was absolutely chameleonic. It was kind of like growing up in a mafia family. Because you guys were always around. We were all very connected. But I couldn't explain that to little kids at school. If they'd come over. You can't go, oh, that guy used to live in a tree and eat raw meat. So I learned to maneuver. And I thought I was really a Cosmo girl. I got along with everybody. What it was I didn't really have a self. I was pretty manipulative. I thought I was very, very nice. But what I was very, very nice to you to give me what I want right now. And everybody else. So that went on when I was about 12. I had, God always, in my experience, gives us these forks in the road all the time. I mean, this life is quite an adventure. If you're new here and you're thinking, oh, I hope, now my life is, I'm in AA now. How boring. I'll never dance again. I'll never have fun. Exactly the opposite. There is no more psychedelic life than life on the natch. But what happened was I went to the beach with a bunch of your kids when I was about 12, and we had a beer and a joint. And it was amazing. And I didn't get drunk and stagger away or get arrested or any of that stuff or black out like Patrick. I just loved it. I'm just me for a minute. I didn't even know I wasn't me until then. And so I loved it from then on and did it however and whenever I could and gravitated toward those kids at school and did all that. And I also fancied myself brilliant because, look, I got a house full of you. I got to look right, act right, can't smell like alcohol. I got to be, so I thought I was really working it. That went on for a few years, a lot of fun. When I got into high school, my parents sent me to this Tony little Catholic high school, St. Monica's. All my friends lived here in Brentwood. Well, all my friends at school lived here in Brentwood. I could go to their houses and have classy parties where we'd drink and, skinny dip and have 7 and 7s. And then I had my little friends in the park, and we did all the other stuff. So I just got along with everybody, and everything was great. And when the drinking, I don't think I was blacking out too much then. And my mother only smelled it on me once. She followed me around for a few days. Then she had to go back to work, and maybe her Al-Anon kicked in, and she let me alone. So, I remember, and my dad is, in retrospect, I see he was genius because he exposed us to this our whole lives so that we always knew. He would say, if you guys ever have a problem, you know where to go. But he never, ever said anything about my drinking. I can remember when I was about 15, I went to a concert, drank a bunch of Southern Comfort, called my dad, oh, I'm going to stay over at George's, okay? He's like, no, I'll come get you. He brought me home, didn't say a word. Good night, honey. I sat down, and the guy living in our garage came in. And he said, oh my God, you're so loaded. Ugh, blah. Just, you know. And I'm like, funny, my dad didn't notice. But anyway, after I graduated high school, I know how to act right. I know you go to college. That's what people do. So I got a nice scholarship offer. I turned that down, of course. So I go to SMC. I was subletting one of your houses, one of your apartments near SMC. So that was like the open house, and everybody could come and do whatever they wanted. And I like excitement, and I like exciting people. And sometimes it was too exciting, you know. But that seemed to work. But then I did start to black out. So coming out of a blackout going, don't give me any more of that PCP. I hate that. And I had another fork in the road. You know, God gives you all these forks, and I don't think there's any direction you can take that God's going to go, okay, that's it, you're out, get out of here. You know, we're trudging a lot of roads before we get here. And one thing that happened was a guy that my dad sponsored asked me out on a date. And how kinky and incestuous is that? So it seemed exciting. So I went out with this guy, and I fell in love with him immediately. He was a lot older. He had wives and kids everywhere. He was a heroin addict. He was a barbiturate addict. He'd been in Camarillo, and he'd been in San Quentin. What is not to love? So we had a tumultuous little courtship, had a big fight. I moved up to Northern California. He followed me. I got pregnant, and we got married. And how fabulous was that? I was just working my way up through colleges in California in the old days. Sorry, kids, but in the old days, all you had to do is write a good letter and you're in. So I was just, you know, enrolling in 3 classes, dropping 2 every quarter, but trying. And this marriage was going to save me, and this baby was going to save me. I had 3 dreams growing up. One was I was going to be a rock star. I knew that was going to happen. 2, I was going to be like Gidget at the UN. I was going to change the world. And 3rd, I was going to have 1 baby from every ethnicity. So, and what I imagined it would be was a room full of rainbow children going, we love you, we love you, we love you. So here comes the first baby. So I flew down one weekend from UC Davis where I was going. We got married. I flew back up to school. The first 3 months of our marriage were great. Because I was living in Davis, going, today I'm married, whoops, today I'm not, whoops, today I am. And so I came down, and it just was on. Because I can't act right 24/7 in my house, and why should I have to? And so we just started to fight and fight and fight. And he's an angry dude, and so it was just perfect for that. And I won't go over the 12 beautiful years of that marriage. I'll tell you, we had 3 babies in the first 5 years because I really believed one of those would save us, just save us. And we went to marriage counseling, and the counselor said, what is it you want? And I said, I don't know what I want, but I know it's not this. And years later, when I worked my steps, I realized that was the mantra of my life. I'd go this way, oh no, not that, oh that way, oh that looks better over there. It was very difficult. And but I'll give you a quick snapshot. I'll wrap up those 12 years in this. So our marriage got progressively more violent. You know what? We created a horrible house of chaos and pain for those babies. I love them as much as I could love them. I really did. But I was so sick, and I was trying to make them act right, but right looked different to me about every 10 minutes. And, you know, I always blamed him. I blamed him probably 10 years into sobriety for all the bad stuff in our house, even though he was the sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, because he's an angry guy. But, you know, that wasn't fair. We created that house together, and he stayed in, man. He stayed in and tried. And I have to give him a lot of credit for that. And so one day, I was sitting on the couch with one of our newborns, and he was walking out of the door, and I just said something helpful. And he just picked up a big potted plant and threw it through the glass window on top of us. I was so furious. Okay, that's it. Now I'm calling the cops. This time I'm calling the cops. So I called the cops. Cops came. They sent an AA and an Al-Anon, coincidentally. They talked to us. We vented. I didn't press charges. They left that night. He was packing up. He's like, I'm going. I'm not staying with somebody who'd put me back in jail. And I threw myself on the floor on my face. I grabbed his legs. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. I mean, that's the woman I was. It was pathetic and sad and sickening. So that went on for a little while. Well, what eventually happened was I have two older sisters, Mary and Kathy, who drank like I drank, but they both lived in New Mexico. I just backed out of life entirely. I was the alcoholic that would have died in my cave. In fact, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted you to find me probably half-eaten by the dogs. But my face had to look pretty so you'd feel bad. And I just retreated from jobs, from school, from friends, from life. Because I grew up here. I know what acting right looks like, and I knew I couldn't act right anymore. I can't act right anymore. And toward the end of my drinking, the alcohol quit being my best friend and my true love. And that predator in my head wouldn't shut up. And I would have to drink till I passed out just to shut it up. So there wasn't any fun when people go, yeah, I miss partying. I do too. I can barely remember partying. Those last few years were ugly and awful. And one day my sister Mary called me from New Mexico, and she's like, hey, I've been going to meetings for 90 days. And I'm like, ugh. Like, what? I felt so betrayed. Like, now you're crazy AA? I only have 2 friends left, you and Kathy's pretty spiky. So now what do I do? I have nobody to talk to. But I thought about that on the floor for a couple days. And I lived on my kitchen floor, just kind of wrapped around the cat dishes, singing sad songs. My husband would come in and we'd argue a little and he'd go back out. So I thought, she probably just said that because she thinks I have a drinking problem. So I'm going to prove to you guys I don't, and then God will kill me. That was my whole intention of coming here. I had no desire, honest or otherwise, of stopping drinking. I couldn't stop drinking, and I couldn't live how I was living. And I knew I wasn't alcoholic because I know you. I've heard 10,000 stories. You go to jail, you go to the nut house, you get on a motorcycle and head off to Mexico for years. All this stuff. That's not my story. So I don't know what my problem is, but I know I have to get out of here. So I thought, okay, this is how God works. Like I believed in a God even then, but I was kind of like a Catholic witch. I had a little shrine. I'd light my candles. I'd ask God for help. The help wouldn't come. Okay, whatever. But this time I knew the help was going to come. My help was like, please, God, help me not to drink tomorrow. Help me not to hit my kids tomorrow. Help me not to throw stuff at my husband as he leaves for work. I couldn't help doing that. But that night I prayed, God, I'll go to this meeting. You'll all vote. Is she an alcoholic? No. Okay. So I proved that to Mary. And then I come back home, and then God kills me, and that was my whole plan. I don't think your motive matters here. I don't think what you think here ever matters. It never matters what you think. It just matters what you do. And you show that teeniest, in the third step in the 12 and 12 where it talks about you show that teeniest, you crack that door of willingness open the teeniest bit, and God just races in. There's nobody more unlikely to come here and stay here than me. Because I already knew all this. I'd been to Al-Anon briefly. I knew all that. I knew everything. But I walked into the meeting and I was terrified. I drank wine coolers all day so I'd be sober. And then I stood in the lobby and I just shook and shook. And finally I went in and sat in the back row, and I just heard that part of chapter 3. They go insane or they die. And I knew I was insane. That was my first sane thought in years. And I knew I was dead inside. I just wanted to be dead outside. And I couldn't kill myself. I'm a wimp. And I wanted to look pretty. So that's all I heard. I didn't go, I'm home, yay, thank you. So at the end of the meeting, see, God uses everything. I know you don't run out. You look like a loser. Stand there, look cool for a minute, and then saunter out. So after the meeting, I stood there, and this Barbie doll ran up on me. Hey, honey, you visiting? And I couldn't fight or flee. I just stood there terrified. And she took me outside, and I just wept, and she gave me a meeting directory and a book, and she had this other lady with her. Another thing God uses, the other lady, Jackie, had this bright red lipstick. I was fascinated with that. I just stared at that lipstick. So this one's going, meh, meh. Okay, don't try to tell me about the program. I love that lipstick. Okay, something got in. And she said, get rid of the alcohol in your house. Call me tomorrow, honey. I went home. I drank up everything I had left in my house. Because what else are you going to do? I still have a hard time. I'm married to a normal guy now. And he'll leave half a beer. And I still, I can barely stand to pour it down the drain. I would like run around the room. Anybody want this? Anyway. So I just got up and called her the next day. That's a miracle. I didn't wake up in the middle of the night needing a drink because the predator was trying to kill me. And I got up the next day and I called her, and I started following her to 5 meetings a week. And I don't know when the moment happened that she would say, raise your hand, say I'm Susan Alcoholic. I don't know when that happened, but I knew it, I knew it. And then she said, let's work. I asked her to be my sponsor. She said, I can only do what my sponsor did with me. We'll go through the steps. This way, we did. I had a book, got through the 12 steps in my first year. And when I was about 6 months sober, same thing. When I was about 6 months sober, I'd gotten a little job at a church that was attached to a school, and this woman came in who worked at the school and came into the meeting, and it's like, right? You don't mind if they see you barfing at the Ralphs, but at a meeting means you have a problem. So my sponsor said, you don't have to like her, act like you like her. I talked to her. She seemed too cool, too pretty. She only had 2 days. She was too cool for me. I didn't like anybody still, but my sponsor said, well, you can pretend you do. And so every day at work, I would leave her little notes or talk to her. It turned out we lived on the same street, and we drove the same car, and we had the same wild kids, and we had the same mercurial spouse. We had everything in common. I had no idea. A speaker I like, Ralph, talks about, get yourself a road dog. And I had a road dog. So every morning we'd get up before work and walk for miles and pray and look at the wild parrots and go, if we ever get 10 years, we're going to get a parrot tattoo. And have a parrot tattoo. So, but it was wonderful. And when I finished my steps, she said, would you be my sponsor? And I'm like, oh no, sponsors have to know something. I don't know anything. But my sponsor keeps it delightfully simple always. You know, she's all about you're just God's kid and you can only give what you got. Give her what I gave you, honey. Okay. So we got to walk through the books again the second year and walk through all those steps. And what a miracle that was. And by this time, both my older sisters were sober. What a miracle that is. You know, I can't think my case is different. I have 2 women with exactly my story that I know. So this sponsor said, you know, call 3 women a day who have more time than you do. And you don't have to tell them a big story. Just say, hi, this is Susan, and I'm calling you and to say hi. And get in the habit of reaching out to people. I was so isolated. I didn't reach out to anyone ever, and so I slowly learned to do that. And she said, stay in your marriage for a year unless your life's in danger, and I did that. And my life... He would say, if I could catch you, I'll kill you, but he couldn't catch me. So my marriage broke up a couple years after that. I moved to New Mexico where my sisters were, and this was going to be my rocket to the 4th dimension. It was all going to happen now. Perfect job, perfect life, no more violence in our home. We still had violence in our home. You know, I didn't come to my first meeting or my first 5 years of meetings and immediately change. These are all a process. I worked the steps. And then I started to practice the steps. And these steps, for me, sometimes were slowly. And when I got anyway, all this was going to magically happen, and I got there. And some of that did happen, but in ways I didn't anticipate. Like, I didn't get my perfect job. And the violence in our home stopped because my daughter got arrested, and she was my primary fighting partner. And I did it. I called the police. Because I was afraid. She said she wanted to kill me, and I was afraid she might. And watching them bring her down in those handcuffs were the closest I've been to suicidal in sobriety. But you know what? I didn't want to drink, and the reason I didn't want to drink is because I came here every day. And you let me cry, and you let me do anything I needed to do, and you helped me. And she and I ended up in therapy, and the therapist said, "You never bonded, you never will. Let her go." She had just turned 14. You guys said you weren't a mother. Why don't you try being a mother now? And you showed me how to be a mother. And slowly, slowly. And those boys, one of my boys ended up getting arrested for bringing a bomb to school. But he was very sensitive and loving. They didn't understand that, but... And my third child from that marriage had a low fetal alcohol effect. He had a hard time. He had little seizures as a kid. He couldn't run and do things like other kids. He couldn't think like other kids, and they just kept kicking him out of schools. And when I got to Santa Fe, they said, "Hey, we want to put him in this special school." And I said, "Absolutely not. That's not my fourth dimension plan. He's supposed to be regular now." And you guys said, "Why don't you keep the open mind? You willing to keep the open mind?" So I put him in that school. Amazing. I lived there 2 years. He walked in third grade. He couldn't write his name. He walked out in fifth grade at grade level. Now he's this tall, handsome, brilliant EMT. Trying to go to nursing school. Amazing. That daughter I told you about that wanted to kill me, and we never bonded. Now she's my best friend. She's my best friend. We talk every day. She's 37. She has 3 children that she leaves with me. Amazing. Instead of bringing them to visit me in the cemetery like she'd hoped. And I guess the message there is, if you're brutalizing people in your family, the amends don't happen with a casual apology. These amends go on forever. I asked my sponsor once, "Well, how much do I have to change? Geez, there must be something good about me." She said, "No, honey, you got to change everything." So that's a lifetime of work. But I'm so grateful, and after Santa Fe, I moved back here to Los Angeles, and I married this normal guy who teaches me everything about love and forgiveness, everything about love and forgiveness. He's amazing. And we had 2 more kids. He had 2, I had 3, and then we had 2 more. So happy Brady Bunch. But my 2 babies are right there in the front row with me tonight. And these 2 have never seen me drunk, and they've never been abandoned, and they've never been beat up. And I'm so grateful. So we moved back here, and I'm the type of person, I've mentioned this in meetings before, where I don't really like to be around you. I like to long for you. I'm a depressive, so I like to sit home and go, "Oh, I wish he'd call or come over." But then if he does, I'm like, "Oh, go away." So, that was a index of maladjustments that I've had to learn to do differently here. And I can honestly say I walk into meetings, especially this one, and I feel nothing but love for you. It's like coming home to me. And in my home, God didn't say, "Okay, let's give you somebody to live with to temper that." God said, "Let's give you 100 people screaming all the time, and then you just learn how to do that." And I'm so grateful for that, God. I'm so grateful. I look at these grown people that lived despite my best efforts and became, kind, compassionate, good human beings. And my mother was my parents were so, they say we're not saints. Maybe we're not when we get here, but some people turn into them. I think my parents did. They took such good care of my children when I couldn't. And I'm so grateful to them. And my mother, a few years ago, I had this horrible year, like Patrick was talking about, where my mother died suddenly. Happy for her, smile on her face, not happy for me. And then a couple months later, my son went to Folsom. All I know is Oz. And then a couple months later, my beautiful stepson died of a hydrocodone overdose. And then meanwhile, I have 2 other sons. One, every time he takes a drink, he has to smoke meth. And one, every time he takes a drink, he has to slam heroin. And I don't understand that stuff. That's not my story. I don't understand that stuff. And before I got sober, I used to say, If this happens, that happens. When I first got sober, I had an escape plan. Okay, so something bad happens to one of my kids or my husband or my parents, I'm out. And I've sponsored women in here, and I've been able to watch how that looks when that happens. And I learn from you every day, and I learn from the women I sponsor every day. They experience things I never have experienced yet, and I get to stand beside them and help. We get to be there with God, and we get to learn to walk through it. And that's how I learned to walk through my mother's death and this jail thing and this other thing. And the thought of drinking never occurred to me, because you were there the second I was there. You were there the second I was there. Amazing. And my husband got cancer and nearly died of it and had to go through some ghastly treatments that pretty much killed him and brought him back. And I watched women in here, in this room, who walked through that and didn't have the same happy result I had at the end. And they taught me how to do that, how to walk through that with some sort of grace. And that it's okay to panic, and it's okay to grieve, and it's okay to do all this stuff, but we do it together. We do it together. And we come out the other side. And so this last year has been also challenging. Last summer, my brother, I went to the doctor with him, and he kept saying, "I'm not going to the doctor. You don't take a car in when it's not broken." Right, Chris? But so we finally got him to go, and the doctor said, "Oh, you're going to die. You have a year to either die or get a new liver." So we went through that for a few months. And the line that really, really always hits me, that is my kind of one of my mantras here, is I have to let go absolutely. I have to let go absolutely. I have to surrender. And I learned to do that by panicking enough. And when that happened with him, I got to learn that one more time. And how blessed are we? He got a new liver. And I'm so amazed by this loving, merciful God, and that I got to be there with him. I'm not the one who stays there with you for anything, or I wasn't. I am now. When I was growing up, my dad's story and my mom's story to me was just this colorful mythology, like a bunch of exciting stories, but what does it really mean? You know what I mean? And now that's what my drinking life is becoming to me. I'm so grateful. I haven't forgotten it. In fact, today I was at Ralph's, and they have these big new giant bottles like that big of vodka mixed with rosé. What in the world is that? So I was just standing there on the clearance rack going, what in the world is this? And this woman came by and went, "Yeah, I like the pure stuff." And I said, "Yeah, me too." But, and then my dad fell down a couple times, and my dad had a little stroke. And when my mother died, my sister Mary, we were all sitting around, and it was shocking and horrible. And my mother was she was so much the glue that held us together. And my sister Mary said to my dad, "Now you have to be our mom and our dad." And my dad said, "Okay." Amazing. Now, I've always loved my father, but we've never been particularly close, in the sense that he was always very busy with you, and I was always very busy doing whatever I was doing. And in fact, when I made my amends, it consisted of writing him a letter and leaving it on the dining room table and run away. Call later, get that? Great, okay, click. These were our conversations. Hi, kid. We've got about 10 seconds, click. Since my mother died, I have a dad. He stepped up, man. He stepped up. And I started getting these calls. "Hi, darling, how are you?" I'm like, "Who are you?" "And I love you." And we started having fun, watching cartoons together and comparing everyone to you. And watching movies. This week we watched The Birdcage. It was a ton of fun. And being able to be with him. I'm 61 years old, and I have a dad. God, I'm so grateful. And sorry, I know I seem so I think it's because it's close to my birthday. It's really hitting me, the blessing of this life and the blessing of you. And I was talking to a newcomer this week, my daughter and I, not even a newcomer, out there trying to get here. And we said, you're very sick. We can see that you're dying. And would you get help? And he said, yeah, give me a week. Give me a week. And if I can't get it together, I'll go get help. And what a miracle that we all didn't just say, give me a week, right? And that we all get to be here tonight. And again, I'm just so grateful. Thank you so much, Duffy.
Thank you. And you could see them in the front lobby at the break, before the meeting, and after the meeting. There are still commitments that can be filled, so please get in the middle of this group and get a commitment. We celebrate AA birthdays at this meeting. For every 365 days of continuous sobriety, we give a cake with the appropriate number of candles on it. We have several birthdays tonight, so let's sing briskly and speak briefly. Birthday people, don't forget to pick up your candles from the cake as you exit the podium. Our first birthday tonight is for 2 years for Jeff C.
Jeff, alcoholic. I'd like to thank God, John, Clancy, my friends and family, and all of you.
Happy birthday, Jeff. Our next birthday is for 3 years for Billy P.
Hi, my name is Billy, and I am an alcoholic. I'd first like to thank Duffy for allowing me to take my cake tonight, God for allowing me to receive the gift of sobriety again, Alcoholics Anonymous, PG, and everyone in this room who has helped me, especially my amazing and strong and wonderful sponsor, Rhonda Daly. Thank you all. I love you.
Happy birthday, Billy. Our next birthday is for 5 years for Chris C.
Chris, alcoholic. I'd like to thank God. I'd like to thank my sponsor, David. All the men who have mentored and helped me. And Pacific Group, I'd like to thank you.
Happy birthday, Chris. Our next birthday is for 5 years for Anthony.
Hi, Anthony Harris, alcoholic. I want to thank this great universe. I want to thank my lovely sponsor, Joyce, for working with me. I want to thank Clancy for everything you've done for me and everybody in this room practically. And I want to thank the men that I sponsor. You've changed my life, and all of you. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Anthony. Our next year is for 11 years for Therese.
I am Therese, alcoholic. I want to thank God, my sponsor Betty, my boyfriend Mark, Julie, Kenna, and all of you. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Therese. Our next birthday is for 14 years for Rich B.
Rich alcoholic. I want to thank God. I want to thank my sponsor, Danny. Thank all the men I sponsor, and a shout out to the coffee crew. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Rich. Our next birthday is for 16 years for Mike C.
Mike, I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to thank Duffy, God, my sponsor, my wife, and the men and women of PG. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Mike. Our next birthday is for 18 years for Terry L.
Hi, my name is Terry Leary, and I am an alcoholic. I want to thank God, Betty H., Kim S. I want to thank the women I sponsor. I want to thank Clancy, Sharon C. I want to thank the money counting crew, class of 2001, and I want to thank, guys. I want to thank my boyfriend, Chris, for sharing his beautiful spirit and heart with me, and I want to thank all of you.
Happy birthday, Terry. Okay, let's pick it up. I'm trying. Gotta sing briskly. Okay, our next birthday is for 19 years for Marjorie.
Hi, I'm Margie. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, I'd like to thank God, Clancy, my incredible sponsor, Mary Murphy. Thank you for all you do for all of us, and my AA sisters, and all of you.
Happy birthday. Our next birthday is for 20 years for Linda. Love.
Hi, I'm Linda, alcoholic. And I'd like to thank God, my wonderful, amazing sponsor, Rhonda, my wonderful husband, Eric L., all the women that I sponsor, Clancy, and all of you.
Happy birthday, Linda. Our next birthday is for 22 years for Roberta.
Hi, I'm Roberta, and I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank God. I want to thank my amazing sponsor, Susie, who has stuck by me for 22 years. And I just want to say how happy I am to be in this room with so many people I love. And I want to thank Clancy. I want to thank Alcoholics Anonymous and all of you. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Roberta. Our next birthday is for 33 years for Carl.
Carl Bennett, alcoholic. I'd like to thank God, Alcoholics Anonymous, my sponsor, Robert, Clancy for the group, and all of you. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Carl. Our next birthday is for 34 years for Bill C.
Good evening. My name is Bill Conaway. I'm an alcoholic. And first, I'd like to thank God for getting me here and keeping me here. And I want to thank my loving and kind sponsor, Joe S. And I'd like to thank my best friend, Al, and the class of 1985. And I especially want to thank my son, Tim, who's here tonight with me. When I had my stroke in 2016, it turned out that through a situation where he came back home to take care of me, and we're 18 years apart, and it's like having a brother and a son all at the same time. And all of you, thank you.
Happy birthday, Bill. And our last birthday tonight is for 48 years for past Secretary Rhonda.
Rhonda Daly, alcoholic. Thank you, Clancy. Thank you, Millie. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, PG. Thank you, AA.
Happy birthday, Rhonda. That is a total of 14 birthdays for 250 years with an average of 17.9 years. Okay. We don't save seats